Hello, everybody.
Hi, guys.
Hi, everyone.
You probably wonder who this wonderful voice is sitting next to us. Very quickly, he is an actor, a writer, a singer.
I didn't realize you've been researching.
Oh, we do the work
Google's a
over
powerful
here.
thing, my friend.
He is also a classical text and monologue coach and associate artist at Bard City. He's performed with the Royal Shakespeare Company and the West End and has been most recently seen off-Broadway in the show Puffs and with Rude Grooms in The Changeling. Please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Harry Waller. How you doing,
everyone.
man?
Yeah,
Hey, Harry.
good.
Thanks for
I'm
being on the
good.
show.
Thanks for having me, of course. That was really impressive because you listed all of that stuff without anything written down.
Always ready.
I'm going to go check on the mac and cheese.
So I didn't get to make it out to the Troilus and Cressida intensive that you did. So you guys did an act a day.
Yeah, it's so we call it Shakespeare in a week. Owen's been doing these for a while. He did one last year at Classic Stage Company, which was Antony and Cleopatra. And yeah, we stage it in a week. So Monday to Friday, you will stage an act, and then we run the act at the end of the day. But actually, it's kind of amazing how much detail and clarity of storytelling people are able to get to in that short space of time.
Do you think that the shorter window of time lends itself to finding that clarity, or has it been like a challenge to get there because you have a smaller window?
It's definitely a challenge, and there's always going to be moments where you're like, with another week. It's really helpful that Owen is such a good director because he comes in with a very strong viewpoint on the play.
So were there people in that group doing Shakespeare for the first time?
No, I think everyone had done it before, but there was definitely varying levels of experience. So I think like in that context, having Owen as a very like specific guiding hand is helpful.
And how did you and Owen start working together?
When I moved here, he came over here for a while to live, and we obviously had lots of mutual friends who were like, oh well, you've got to meet up and hang out, and so we did. And it turned out that he was doing a thing with the RSC in New York, sort of developmental thing, and got me involved in that.
And that didn't happen until you were both here in New York.
Yeah, randomly,
Which is crazy
because we have so many mutual friends, and we were in Stratford, I think, at the same time roughly, because when I was doing Wendy and Peter Pan there, and I think he was just finishing up doing Henry V.
So you've been in New York since when?
April 2017.
April 2017. So just like over 2 years or so
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then you obviously like worked in England before that.
Yeah, I for quite a while, I guess.
Did you
9
start
years.
Did you start
8, 9
working
years.
like right away after you graduated? Had you been working before that, or
Pretty much. Yeah, I got my first kind of what I consider to be like formative gig within like 6 months.
what was it?
It was a musical called Saturday Night by Sondheim, and it was the UK premiere of
Wow.
So he wrote that when he was like 23, and it never made it to Broadway. It was supposed to, but the producer died when it was out of town, and so it lost its money and it didn't make it. And they had done it as like a reading in the 90s, I think, in London, but the book was kind of all over the place. And so from that reading, I think Sondheim went, oh, there's maybe some potential in this. I'll rewrite it a bit. And he wrote some new songs for it, and they did it off Broadway. And then we were the first production in the UK.
What was that experience like?
It was good, but it was it sounds more fancy than it was. It was very like small scale. Most of us were just out of drama school, but it was wonderful. Really, honestly, that's like one of the places where I've probably made some of the best friends that I've had.
Have you always been a musical theater person?
I didn't train in musical theatre. I did what I guess you'd call like a classical acting course at Rose Bruford. But I was always musical, and I'd always done musicals growing up because that was kind of what was on offer. And I actually, at that point, I was signed with a musical theatre agent, because I think when I got out of college, I was like, oh, that's where I'll find work. And then it just happened that my career kind of completely went away from that. That was pretty much the only musical I've done. I mean, I've done a lot of shows that have music in them. Oh, that's not fair. No, I have done a couple of like little musicals. I've used music a lot in my career, I would say.
And so where did the switch come from this sort of musically inclined track to getting into classic work?
Well, I'd always done classic stuff as well. We did classical stuff at drama school, and actually my first gig out of drama school was a production of Romeo and Juliet, a small scale touring production. And so,
Who were you?
I was Benvolio.
Oh, awesome.
That's who you'd cast me as. That's what I would still apply for. Like, if it was,
Yeah.
for now, until I'm old enough to be Lady Capulet.
Yes, of course.
But
I would pay some money to see your Lady C.
For real, though.
what? Make it happen, Monty.
We can just do it again next year.
Yeah,
right?
we could
New cast.
just do a Romeo and Juliet every
I feel like
summer.
it wouldn't go down well, you know. No, maybe. I played Regan last year in King Lear.
Did you really?
I love Regan.
Oh, that must have been something else.
It was great. That was really exciting. Because you know when you're like, I never thought I'd get to play that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was with the Shakespeare Forum.
But didn't everyone kind of play everyone? Isn't that what you were saying?
No, we all had specific. Oh, just shouted. No. We all had specific parts that we played, but there was no one King Lear. Everybody played Lear. So we all had one part, and then we at different points we would become Lear. So I was really lucky. I got the storm scene.
Yes. Oh my god,
which is quite fun. So I got to shut him out of our house, and then go into the storm scene.
Oh my god,
which was quite a journey. Yeah, that was fun.
So you started working after school, and you were like working consistently from there.
I mean, consistent. I mean, yeah, as much as consistent as anybody is.
Sure.
I had regular gigs.
You had regular gigs, and then that was right up until the time that you moved here in 2017.
Yeah, so I had just closed the happiest time, probably that I would say the happiest time of my life, probably, apart from obviously marrying my husband and all of that. I was really lucky to do a couple of shows at the RSC, which then 18 months after we'd done them in Stratford transferred to the West End. And I was just a minor player. I was Balthazar in Much Ado, and I was a footman in Love Savers Lost and understudied Longaville. But it was just joyful.
What made it so wonderful?
Both those shows were directed by a director called Christopher Luscombe, who's amazing, who I've worked with a number of times. He actually gave me my first equity job in the UK. Which was a tour of the History Boys, which I understudied on. And then he took it out the following year and cast me as a kind of principal. Then I've worked with him subsequently, I think 4 times. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got in at the RSC, really, is because of him.
How many UK actors' first big breaks came from a production of History Boys? I mean, it's like you just look at the list of people from that show. And
actually, this was not the National Theatre production. It was the first professional non-National Theatre production. It was West Yorkshire Playhouse, Theatre Royal Bath co-production. So Chris totally restaged it. He did a new cut. It was great. It was a really beautiful show. Now talking about all these things, I'm like, I'm so lucky, like getting to do, and to work. And also like, I've been so lucky with these companies that I worked with that were just full of great people, like really kind, wonderful people. Because that's not always the way. Chris in particular is a complete legend. I would not have had a career, or at least anywhere. I wouldn't have achieved half of the things that I can now be like, yeah, I did that, without his belief in me, or like his wanting to work with me and like re-employing me and recommending me for things.
And it's just so, I mean, No Gwyn, which he directed at the Globe, is absolutely in my top 5 favorite shows I've ever seen, if not at the top of those 5.
Yeah, He's a bit of especially with comedy, he's a bit of a genius, I think. He's incredibly specific about, particularly like visually. specific. I think that's why he works, especially for comedy, because his attention to visual detail and to like rhythmic beats of comedy is amazing, and which is especially works for Shakespearean comedy. Like his Love Savers Lost that we did, it was really quite sublime, I think.
Is that on tape? Can you?
Yeah, it's the RSCs. They have it down as Love Savers Lost and Love Savers 1.
Oh, right.
Love Savers 1 is just Much Ado About Nothing, but they titled it that way because they were set in the same place, basically. So they did them as companion pieces. They shared the same cast. They shared a lot of the same set. They were bracketed on both sides of the First World War. So Love Savers Lost ended with the boys all going off to the First World War. We then, part of that season, we then did a new play set in the First World War about the Christmas truce of 1914. And then we came back to the same house for Much Ado About Nothing. And we had, it was the winter of 1918. And the soldiers are coming back from the war.
Oh, wow.
And so was the idea that Baroon is Benedict and Rosalind is Beatrice?
It was double cast in that way. No, the idea wasn't that they are the same characters. I think the way Chris described it was that it was like trying to find the echoes in those characters because there are a lot of similarities.
Oh yeah, like the prototypes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like it did just tie together really beautifully. That idea of I know you of old and all of that stuff just had such a different resonance when and especially because you could come and see a matinee of Love Savers Lost and then stay and see the evening production.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was kind of cool.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So then you closed that show and then came to...
3 weeks later or something.
3 weeks? What? That's a ridiculous turnaround.
Yeah, it was mental.
What brought you stateside?
Well, I was in a long distance relationship for 4.5 years.
Wow.
So we met in London. He was, he'd studied there, done an MA at Central School of Speech and Drama, and then he was on a graduate visa when we met, and we were together for like 9 months in London, and then his visa ran out, and he had to move back here, and we did the long distance thing for a long time, and then at some point we were like, no, we need to be in the same place now, and it made more sense for me at that point to come here.
Did you investigate like the legal process both ways? Is one easier than the other?
Not massively. I haven't actually really investigated the other way. I think it's possibly harder going that way. I think there's harder financial. The UK is quite specific about how much money that I would need to be earning in order to support my partner. Now,
were you planning a wedding while you were long distance, or did you get here and you were just like, you know what we should do? We should just go ahead and get married.
No, I was on a fiancé visa, so we knew we had to get married really soon. We'd worked out the date. Because obviously we had some family coming over from the UK, but it was a very, very small wedding. It was like 25 people, and we did it in Prospect Park. And,
that's lovely.
Where?
Underneath, on the south side of the park, there's like this. It's sort of a mock ancient Greek.
Yes.
Shelter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's got those pillars, and it's quite pretty. You just book to have the space, so it was like $25 permit.
Right.
There was absolutely nothing provided, obviously, because they're just like, yeah, you can have that space, and there's no privacy. So like we had like two guys setting up a barbecue next to us. We had another guy like leaning on his bike watching us as we were getting married. It was nice. I was like, that's kind of what we wanted.
That's actually kind of lovely.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The whole park is your guest list, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like we did have a big party back in London a year later to be like, for those who couldn't make it.
Right.
It was kind of perfect, exactly. And it was because it was small, because there was so much stress involved in like moving countries anyway, that like having something that was quite easy to organize was...
I'm sure like a load off.
Yeah.
And so how's it been for you since coming here to New York versus working in the UK? Honestly,
it's been really interesting. I've been and difficult, and I've basically had to learn a whole new industry. There were words that I did not understand.
Like what?
Like people would be talking about EPAs when I first got here. I was like, what is an EPA? Like it's a very, very different industry here, and the rules are very different, and the way things work are very different. I mean, in the UK, we have equity, but it's an open shop in terms of like, you can be non-equity, you can be like someone who's not signed up to equity and have like the top acting gig at the National Theatre and not be a member, you'll have someone like come around and knock on your door and say like, we really think that you should sign up and become a member of equity. It'd be really great if you would. But you have no obligation to. I mean, I believe everyone should. That's my 2 cents. But like, you don't have to because it's an open shop, which I believe would be different here, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you wouldn't be able to.
There'd be no pressure on you. So America's just so complicated and messed up. In certain states, it's that way because there's what's called a right to work law. So in those states, a union can't punish an employer for hiring a non-union employee. So what that means is like, let's say Texas is a right to work state. So you could have a non-union actor playing the lead role in a Broadway-bound musical at the Dallas Theater Center. But if that musical then left Dallas and came to New York, which is not a right to work state, then if the producers hired that actor and that actor refused to join the union, the employer would not be allowed to hire them or they'd have the contract pulled.
Yeah.
Because in New York, you are allowed to require people to hire.
Right, yeah. It's really different. It's so different because also in the UK, if you're a member of equity, you can take whatever work you want and you won't get punished for it. So when I first got here, because of I had a work permit, but I didn't have a green card, equity took a while to let me become a member. And so I was like a non-equity actor trying to find work.
Right.
But not really, it's complicated, as I'm sure you guys will know. Because I had to wait for my green card to come, which came earlier this year. But I was in a show on a contract that wasn't an equity contract at the time. So I had to leave that show in order to join equity because,
It's just so unnecessarily complicated.
Well, I'm very, very, very pleased to be a member of the union now. And like, I believe in unions and I do have an appreciation for the fact that equity looks after people and advocates for the workers.
Being very lucky and privileged to be a member of both UK and US equity like you are, one of the things that shocked me going the other direction was in this country, there are such barriers to joining Actors Equity. Either you get hired at a big union house and they want you so bad that they offer you an equity contract and then you can pay up and you can join. But for most actors, you work non-union, so an EPA, which for the non-actors or non-US residents out there is an equity principal audition, the required auditions that equity theaters have to have so that there's a way for actors without agents or who don't have a pre-existing relationship with the theater to be seen. But if you're non-union, the odds of getting seen at an EPA are next to zero.
I guess it depends on the theater and the production, right? It depends how many equity members are wanting to go up for that particular open call.
Did you ever go to EPAs when you were non-union?
No. I couldn't put myself through it.
As the resident non-union person on this discussion, it really is a roll of the dice, man. Like there have been some EPAs that I've gone to where they will say, just hang out and we will try to get you all in when we can. And some of them are really good about it, particularly if you get there early enough. And then there are some EPAs where they will tell you up front, like it'll be listed as an EPA, but then you get there and they're just like, we're not seeing any non-union.
They're not required to see non-union.
Yeah.
Even if half the appointments are filled, they don't have to see non-union.
This is true, yeah.
They're only required to see equity members.
I've been to some EPAs where you'll get there, like you'll see the breakdown and like you'll put time aside in your schedule and you get there. You try to get there early, make sure that all your stuff is lined up the way that it's supposed to be, and they will tell you as soon as you arrive, we're not seeing any non-union people today. We're not gonna do it. And then there's the opposite, which I think is the most brutal option, where you sit there for an entire day. It's essentially like it's akin in my mind to jury duty. The one time I've got called up
Oh
for
my
jury.
God, it's so similar.
The one time I got called in for jury duty was very reminiscent. I like got major EPA vibes or like major EPA flashbacks because you sit there for the whole day.
And then they come out and they say, "Sorry, guys, we don't have any space."
At the end of the day, though.
But having said that, I know some non-union actors who have gone to EPAs and got gigs out of it.
Oh, for sure.
And it's like, and that is like exactly how that thing should happen, and it's entirely different to the UK.
In what way?
There's no such thing as an EPA. We don't hold open calls. Like maybe occasionally The Lion King, or like if they're looking for something very specific, or I think sometimes it's about like, you know, a sort of publicity drive to like marketing the show to get people excited about like you could be in such and such a show. But in the UK, the auditions are entirely appointment based. There is no such thing as a turn up and wait to see if you can get in. Really, I've never experienced that.
Do most people leave drama school with an agent?
No, I mean that's the idea, is that you would go to drama school and get an agent. The year that I went to drama school, I mean, I think we were quite unlucky because it was 2008 and it was the year of the crash and everything. Mm-hmm. But like a lot of people didn't.
Like half? Like
yeah, probably I think about half of us got agents. And it's really tough if you don't have an agent in the UK.
Are there breakdown services akin to like Backstage and Actors Access?
We have like a UK Backstage. I don't think that was around when I first started, so I don't know what that's like. Mm-hmm. I think it's just the same as what it is here. We don't have Actors Access. We have a thing called Spotlight, which all professional actors in the UK are members of. But a lot of the things, or at least my memory of those services, is that it's mostly low paying or like small scale independent work. And obviously like that's how a lot of people get their foot in the door, is like scouring those and meeting someone, and then that person, whatever, or like getting a show off West End or like Fringe that you can invite an agent to. But like like none of the big houses, like the National, any of the big houses that do like equity paying high level work do open calls. You would need to have an agent pretty much, unless you were very lucky with like they were looking for something very specific and you happened to write in for it, or you met the casting director at something and they, you know, it's like it's a much more closed industry in that way. But also the benefit of that, if you have an agent or whatever, is it's much less saturated. Yeah.
There's more of a direct pathway to getting your in or getting your foot in the door. Mm-hmm. But if you sort of miss that train, it becomes exponentially harder to do so.
Yeah.
Whereas here, I feel like there's a problem with the illusion of having so many options.
Right.
Because it's like you can go to an EPA, you can look at Backstage, you can look at Playbill, you can look at Actors Access. And like theoretically speaking, you're always one audition away from your breakout whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, which can be very alluring. I know for like in my own experience, the conversations that I've had with people who are not familiar with this industry is it's just like, well, you know, you just got to go to one and eventually, you know, you'll get discovered and that'll be how it takes off. I'm just like,
here there are like thousands and thousands and thousands of people trying to do it. And like, I feel like in some ways it's brilliant because there is like a level of openness that you don't have to have gone to a top drama school in order to, if you're great, if you're really good and you go in for something at an EPA and somebody sees you and likes you, there's a potential that you could get a really great gig without having necessarily gone to Juilliard. However, that saturation of the industry and that illusion of openness or whatever means that you have like all levels of experience, ability, commitment to the career applying for the same job. Whereas in the UK, if you had like gone and studied something completely different and had never done a professional job in your life, you're probably not going to get seen by the RSC for any audition. They're probably going to expect that you've done some stuff before you go to them. That's not to be like to poo-poo the RSC or anything, but like that's just how it works. Like it's hard. It's hard to get into that top level of work unless your CV demonstrates that you have like some chops.
You've got to be credentialed in some way.
In some way, yeah, probably, yeah.
The best that ever happened, I got a couple of jobs from EPAs, small jobs. And then I got to the point of being on hold for the Breakfast at Tiffany's on Broadway a couple of years ago from an EPA. So that's pretty cool, right? But I was already an equity member here, which is why I was able to get seen for that show. I probably would not have gotten seen had I been non-union. I already had a ton of regional credits at that point. I think equity is extraordinary in their advocacy for actors. And I think having EPAs, if nothing else, there is the chance. And the thing that I really have had experience from EPAs was assistants who are in the room liking the work and then calling me in for their small or low paid or unpaid thing. But that builds a relationship. And it's like, it is absolutely a venue to build new relationships. But I do, what you said, the illusion of openness.
Maybe that was too strong.
I think that is correct, because it is not, if you're a plumber, you're not walking into an EPA. And if you do, you're probably not being considered, even if you're extraordinary.
Right.
In that
but you
scene.
can take up that space. Do you know what I mean? The fact that it is open means that literally anybody can go in for that. It's such a tricky conversation, I think, because I'm at once like really impressed by that openness and also like incredibly frustrated by how many people are trying to do this same job, and like, fair enough. Like, who's to say that I should be doing it? We're all like, do you know what I mean? Like, everyone has the right to be going for work and to be trying to make a career for themselves. But it is, I think, coming from the industry that I'm used to, I'm overwhelmed, I think is probably the word, by how many people I am up against at every job.
Really?
For every
job.
job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because in London, I could go up for a job and be like 10 other guys that are getting seen for this. And like, especially if it's like looking for like a particular thing, I can be like, well, of those guys, I might be like one of the three that like actually have the skill set for this job, or whatever. Whereas here, it's like, I might be up against like
100?
500 people.
500, yeah, exactly. And you're like, well, how am I going to make myself stand out from that crowd? I don't know.
So how has that, has it affected your resolve? Because I know, like, for us, that's the environment, at least for me anyway. You grow up being used to that. Like, even when I was a kid and auditioning for things in Florida, you show up and it's just like there are at minimum at least a few dozen other people in the room, and some of them are very similar to you. Some of them are entirely different. Even with auditioning for colleges here, I remember my NYU audition was on the whatever floor of some studio space, and it was like, it looked essentially like an open call. It was essentially, it was essentially
it was that
like,
big for sure.
It was like an open call that day.
And then you get in and it's still like 500 people in a year or
Oh
something.
my God. Yeah. You get into the program and it's like everybody from all walks of life. And so then you're looking at all of these people, and then it's all the people that you saw before that. But what I think is interesting about that is it sort of shapes your resolve to be like, okay, you're here, so is everybody else. You have to, so you got to know for yourself, what is it that you bring to the table that that nobody else does? And you just gotta you gotta rely on that.
Yeah. You've got to be so confident though, right? Like, you've got to have such self-belief here in a way that like, I don't think you necessarily, I look at how it worked for me and I'm like, I went to drama school, and obviously like there was like, I think 2,000 people or something who went up for my drama school, and like 25 of us got in, so like that is like hard odds when you're 19 or whatever. But like, once you've done that, that Sondheim show that I got, the musical director had seen me in my final show at drama school. I had an agent at that point, and I got that show, and then like, I know that like other jobs that I got, I was recommended for by someone, who'd seen me do something or who'd worked with me. And then I ended up working with the same director a number of times. So although I felt like I was working very hard to make ins, I think like a lot of that was sort of beyond my control anyway.
You and I have also talked about like just the length of an audition in the UK, and how much longer and more luxurious.
Wait, okay, how so? Because I'm not familiar with
this. Okay, so because it's like all by appointment, you go in for a play, you have like probably at least 10 minutes, if not like sometimes 15, 20. You'll walk in, the director will say, hey, come have a seat. You sit down with them, you chat about like what you've been up to the last 6 months, or like they're like, oh, you've worked with so-and-so, or I actually saw that show. Like, tell me about that. They'll ask you they want to know about you.
So it's almost like an actual job interview.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah.
Okay.
And then they'll like ask you about the play, like what was your take on the play, like what do you think about the character? And then they'll be like, do you want to read? Like, would you like to read? And then like, and then you...
Oh, it's very much like a job interview. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and then you get up and you read, or you sit down and you read. It's not like there's no obligation necessary to even get out of your seat and show them what you've done. Like it, yeah. It's. I mean, obviously, I think like that helps. But like here, it's like you come in and you're like you've prepared 2 sides, and
they're gonna see one,
and they might see one, and they're like, okay, which side are you going to do today? And you're like, you walk in and they're like, hi Harry, what side are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to do the second side. Okay, great. And you do it, and then they're like, thank you, or they might redirect you. But it's like much more like about the
product. Yeah,
about what they're seeing, as opposed to like, I think the idea in the UK is like, I want to get a sense of what you're like to work with.
Interesting.
Which, I mean, our audition process is largely built on the experiences I had auditioning either in the audition for the Globe, and that one was, I think it was 45 minutes. We were on Skype, so it was different, and we had to be seated, but it was just the most amazing. And then a couple of experiences I've had here at the Public with British directors, they still bring that methodology with them. Yeah. So it's like, sit for 25 minutes, and again, don't stand up. Don't stand up when you're doing the sides. You just sit at the table.
You sometimes can, but I think people will see that as like, oh, he's making an exciting choice.
He's making a choice.
He stood up.
Yeah.
He stood up. Oh, he got out of his seat. Oh, how exciting. What a renegade.
Definitely standing up next time now.
One of the things that we heard a lot from casting directors, in particular when we were at Atlantic, if you do not get a callback or if you don't get the part, et cetera, don't take it personal. They're looking for something very specific, and you could give a great audition. You just may not be right for the thing, but you absolutely cannot take it personal. Is there that sort of same attitude or sentiment in the UK as well?
Yeah, I think like that would be the advice. It's the same thing. You're always, that's the thing about acting, isn't it? Your work is you.
Yep.
Yeah.
No matter how much you want to try and separate it, you are putting something of yourself out there. You can't see the work that you're making. You're just doing what you think is right. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a vulnerable place to be, and a very personal place to be. And so I think it is hard to take that lesson. But I do think, I've definitely heard that in the UK.
Okay.
And when I work with students, having been on the other side of the table a couple of times, our conversations in the room were so different from what I imagined them to be when I'm auditioning for something. We auditioned for a show that I wrote earlier this year. It was so interesting how we had some brilliant actresses come in, and our conversations weren't necessarily about how brilliant they were. It was like, well, I think this actor's energy is a bit more like clean, and this actor's energy is a bit more messy, and we're kind of looking for a bit more of a messy energy from the character.
We had the very, very lucky problem, like particularly for being such a young company, with Romeo and Juliet this year, of having just so many extraordinary actors that we wanted to cast. But I mean, we ended up putting an extra track in the show, but at no point for us was it height or hair color or I don't even really know what it boiled down to.
I think it's like, when we did Lear at Shakespeare Forum, I know Sybil talked a lot about the energy that someone brings to an audition. And she casts not thinking about like anything to do with like how they look or like what their gender identity is or whatever. It's what is the energy of this person? What's the like aura that this person brings? And like what character do I want that energy to fit into?
I think that, at least for me, that was the guiding force in a lot of the And a lot of the audition room for Romeo and Juliet was like, what kind of energy is this person bringing into the room? Are they open to collaboration? Are they open to experimenting and playing? Or are they coming in with like, I have rehearsed this thing. I will do this thing this exact way. I will listen to your note, but then I will go back and do the exact same thing.
But those actors didn't make it to callbacks. I'm talking about like callbacks. Everyone's great. We want to hire them all.
Ah, okay. Yeah. No, I was even talking about even from the first time in the room, because, you know, we would give people before they would give their audition, we would tell them we are an interactive company. We usually perform outdoors for live audiences. So we interact with and engage the audience. So like, feel free to use us. Feel free to break the fourth wall and just like make the space your own. And there were some people who took that note beautifully. And then there were some people who were just like, nope, audition technique says I must not look at you. I must look like right above your head or in a different
Which
direction.
is also fine, right?
Which is fine.
Because what that says to us is you don't want to do that type of theater, which is fine.
Yeah, but it's also
It's totally fine.
Like, it might not even be that. It might also be that it's like, you know, auditioning is hard. And
Yeah.
like often people are very nervous
Yeah.
and like they might really want to buy into that, but like for whatever reason in that moment, they're not able to. And you might, if you had cast them, who knows, you might have got them into a rehearsal room and been like, oh, that worked out brilliantly and we didn't even know it would. I know I've gone into rooms and done dreadful things or like really misrepresented myself, like in terms of like what I can do or and you know, just based on the chemistry of that moment or the, you know, and I think like auditioning is a weird thing.
Well, going back to what you said about the oversaturation of New York, I feel like that's a difference, right? Because even for us at small showcase level, we're doing 3 full days of auditions and filling those appointments. And there are enough people who can take a note and instantly do it. There's no incentive to see the actors who can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then how do you move into that position if you don't ever get the second chance? And I guess it really is just like you know, doing one night shows here and there and like going to the next audition and trying to be a little more nimble.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is amazing about the culture here is taking class.
That is a thing that you also do nowadays. Is that right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for a while. I do a lot of helping people with grad school auditions and like working on particular auditions that they've got coming up.
What would you say, if any, are some of the most prevalent reoccurring themes that you see in terms of like what people need help with?
I'm often trying to get clients to focus on just connecting with the text and just like investing in that scene, you know, because monologues are a scene, even though there's like no scene partner. I feel like what I do a lot of is trying to like unlock the need for perfection in order to obtain that malleability that you're talking about. You know, if you are just about like, well, I want to craft it so that at this point I do this really beautiful thing with my hand, and at this point I raise my voice a little or whatever, then you're not being organic and it would get tired very quickly. And I think, a lot of what I do is about allowing people to feel confident in just like engaging with organically in the moment.
Harry, thanks so much for coming in. Tell everybody
thanks
where,
for having me.
Of course, tell everybody where they can find and follow you.
So I have a website, which is itsharrywaller.com. Very self-aggrandizing. and then,
But I mean, it is.
Hey,
it's
listen,
true.
But it is Harry Waller.
It is.
Or do you belong to it?
harrywaller.com. Yeah, exactly. I am my own. Anyway, and then I'm on all the social medias. Yeah. Oh, and you can follow Bard City on Facebook.
Fantastic.
Just search Bard City, and we're doing workshops and things.
Sorry,
When is the next Shakespeare in a Week? Do you know?
We're talking about the spring. It's not been decided yet.
So wait, so just to be clear, you're on all of the socials at It's Harry Waller or
At Harry_Waller on Twitter.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that's it. That's me.
Okay.
It's all the underscores.
I just want to make sure people know so that after they hear this, they can be like, he was lovely. Where can I find out everything about him and what he's doing in the world?
That's where I am.
There we go.
Easily findable.
And thank you all so much for joining us for episode 3 of This Would Know. This week, we are going to try something brand new. And Daniel and I are each going to share with you a recommendation that we have this week. This could be something that we are watching, reading, listening to that we think if you enjoy this, you might also enjoy. So Daniel, this week, what are you jabbing on?
This week, I am really into a Netflix original show, Living with Yourself. It stars Paul Rudd and Aisling B.
Oh, I saw the trailer for this.
It's really entertaining. I enjoy it a lot. I found Aisling B stand-up on YouTube, just falling down a stand-up comedy rabbit hole, and I think she's really smart and really funny. As much as I love Paul Rudd, I really just tuned into the show for her. And I finished the whole series at this point. I thought it was really entertaining. It satisfies a lot of my sci-fi nerd brain, because I'm not giving anything away here because it talks about this in the trailer, about cloning and alternate versions of yourself and the quote-unquote best version of yourself.
Oh, I didn't realize that's what it was. I thought it was basically like Us with Paul Rudd.
Oh, no. No, if you want, like, the full trailer on Netflix goes into this idea that, like, there's a circumstance that results in, like, a clone of himself that is the quote-unquote best version of himself, and the hijinks that ensue when they're both existing and trying to navigate two people around a single shared life, whether that is personal, professional, or otherwise. And having finished the whole show now, I thought it was a really interesting idea. I'm curious to see what is going to happen with a second season, which I believe has already been greenlit. So I'm really interested to see what happens there and how they continue, because they left things on a really interesting point in the finale.
Well, I mean, if for the second season they need a younger, better Paul Rudd, I mean, I am available.
So hashtag cast Monty and Living with Yourself. We'll find a shorter hashtag. But yeah, Living with Yourself on Netflix.
Living with Monty-self?
Living with Monty-self. So yeah, Living with Yourself on Netflix.
Awesome. Well, now that I finished The Mandalorian, I will definitely be jumping on that train.
There it is.
Mine this week is another podcast. This one is called Knowing Robin Williams. It's an 8-part podcast that tracks Robin Williams' life from being a young boy growing up outside of Detroit until the very end. And Robin Williams' death sent me on a downward spiral that I think, honestly, like, I think is just ending as of like a few days ago. There's a whole kind of series of events, like he's gone, my grandfather's gone, who also suffered from a different form of dementia, and he was much older, but like two kind of big, like, how can these zeitgeists be gone from the world? But this show manages, and of course it gets there and deals with all the complications of the end when you finally get to that point. But what I love about it the most is it illuminates not just the kind of like firecracker, best, most beautiful, bright spots of his life, not just the complicated alcohol, drug abuse, cheating aspects of his life, not just the ending, not just the narcissism, not just the generosity. It's one of the most well-rounded portraits I think I've experienced of a human. And of course, I think it's an extraordinarily well-rounded, well, maybe well-rounded is the wrong word, but very rounded human. And I found it so delightful to revisit moments, so exciting to discover new moments that I had somehow missed, and so cathartic to go on that journey again with a bit more perspective and a little more distance. And it was, if you're a fan of Robin Williams, I literally cannot recommend anything more highly. But even if you're not, I think this really tracks so many shifts in American entertainment and culture, and gives some really interesting insights into our own industry that kind of inspired me after being very, very kind of depressed and cynical about it for several years. So that's my recommendation for this week. We also, this week, Amber Elby tweeted at us based on our first episode. My husband is having a full-on conversation with @the Daniel Kemper and @Montgomery Sutton about Jedi Fallen Order while listening to This Would Know. To be clear, Monty and Daniel pre-recorded the podcast in November, My husband is in the car with me now.
Mr. Amber Elby, if you're listening, I'd be really curious to hear, number one, if you finished Fallen Order yet, and number two, what you thought about the game as a whole, and in particular about the ending. So at us on Twitter, or at me on Twitter, because I don't know. Have you finished Fallen Order yet?
No.
Okay.
You can't spoiler me. Can you use like a private thing?
Yeah, DM me. There we go. Don't at me, DM me.
I will definitely finish it by November 2021.
Okay.
And then we can talk about the ending.
Cool.
It just takes me a while. I'm not very good with the clicking and the joysticks.
The thumbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My thumbs are not my best quality. We also this week have a new supporter on Patreon, and her name is Joan Etheridge. She is my great aunt, and she is great, let me tell you. Yeah, you're all welcome for that. I think I saw all of the prequel Star Wars movies for the first time with her. I definitely saw all of the theatrical re-releases of the original trilogy with her. Mm-hmm. And I definitely saw Phantom Menace on the first day with her. And we went to go see Rise of Skywalker on Christmas.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Anyway, that is it for this week. If you have any comments on this week's episode, or an episode that's come before, or an episode you'd like to hear in the future, please reach out to us on Twitter or Insta at RudeGrooms, at This Wouldn't Know. Shoot us an email to thiswouldn'tknow@rudegrooms.com. Or if you want, you can record an audio, send it there. Maybe we'll play it. Who knows?
We'll more than likely definitely play it because I think that'd be super cool.
Right? I didn't even tell Daniel I was going to say you could do that.
No, but as soon as I heard it, I'm like, no, I'm on board with that. I co-sign that 100%.
Awesome. Great. Then I will not edit that part out. So do it.
And that, I think, is going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the latest episode of This Wouldn't Know. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at the Daniel Kemper, talk about self-aggrandizing.
I'm Monty. You can find me on Twitter at Montgomery Sutton because my name is too damn long, and on Instagram at Montgomery Sutton because Instagram is lovely and likes me more.
Can I check? Is this the wooden O?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
The table.
Yeah. No, we.
If you're listening, join us on Patreon, and you can see what Harry sees.
Mm-hmm. And then tell all your friends so that we can come and take the show to your city. And I will make a pledge right now. If we go on the road,
we're bringing this wooden O.
Table, the wooden O travels with us.
It's not called any wooden O.
It's
called
this wooden O. We're not just coming in. I'm not rolling into like Saskatchewan and just getting a random table from an antique store.
When we record our episode at the Globe, this table will be center stage at the Globe.
There will be a wooden O inside the wooden O. It'll be so meta. It's going to break the universe. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of This Wouldn't Know, hosted and produced by Daniel Kemper and Montgomery Sutton. Original music is by Kara Arena. This Wouldn't Know is brought to you by Rude Grooms, a Queens, New York-based theater company creating epically intimate theatrical experiences in public spaces, non-traditional venues, and new media. Learn more at rudegrooms.com or follow us on social media at Rude Grooms and at This Wouldn't Know.